What's happening, all my awesome peeps? Thanks for tuning back into the channel today, right here with the Rustbelt Mechanic. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I put out a video on the GM UAW strike. Now, I did take that video down because I'll be the first to admit there was quite a few inaccuracies in it, and I wanted to point those out as well as give attention to the areas where I maybe wasn't as generous to the people as I probably should have been. I really want to point out some of those inaccuracies in the video and give a chance to some of the UAW workers to give their side to the story more than my opinion to it. So stay tuned, we're going to get into some new ideas here on the GM UAW strike. Now, first I wanted to get into some of the information that we know about the strike. The UAW has been on strike against GM here for going on the better part of almost 5 weeks now. It involves almost 49,000 UAW GM employees. There hasn't really been much into the strike. They have been talking back and forth, but hitting a lot of stone walls. The UAW has not been on a strike like this since the 1970s, in which they were on strike for upwards of 179 days. We don't really want to see a strike like that again, but it did happen. So 95% of the UAW workforce has not seen a strike like this. Therefore, they've not really been all prepared for a strike like this to happen at the same time. Also, in that video, I gave a little bit of inaccurate information on saying that Chrysler and Ford have reached agreements in which they have not. They have agreed on a certain amount of things, but that's just to extend their contracts until UAW and GM have reached an agreement in which they will then go to the table between the UAW and Chrysler and the UAW and Ford. So very likely, and it could happen, Chrysler and Ford could see a strike like this coming up very soon. They've been striking for such reasons such as pay. They gave up a lot of different things in the 2008 bailout of Chrysler and GM with the government, so they were looking to get some of those things that they gave up at that time to help save General Motors. They're fighting for things such as healthcare, benefits, temporary workers, which I talked about in that video and gave pretty accurate description to that one. A lot of these temporary workers have been hired on through temp agencies and not hired onto GM for almost 6 years of a time. You imagine being on part-time or temporary work through a temp agency at a job where everyone else is doing the exact same work, but you're not getting any of the benefits. I can see where, their gripe is an actual concern that we really need to address. So that's one of the biggest things is helping the temp workers get to a normal paying job. They're also talking about such things as plant closings across the U.S. And the current agreement that they have that they're going to be voting on is closing down 4 plants, including the one that's in Lordstown, Ohio here, which is going to make a big issue here in the local economy. So we don't really want to see that happening, but at the same time, there's not really much you can do with the economy, how GM is moving forward as a company, but it's not really a great thing to see. So there's all kinds of different things that they are fighting for and striking for at the same time. Now, I'm going to preface the rest of this video by bringing up the fact that there are going to be bad apples in any and all organizations. Technicians are not exempt from that. There are bad technicians. There's great technicians in our industry. Same thing goes for the UAW. And some of those bad apples are pretty much a lot of the reason in which, things were, I guess, escalated in the last video. Some of the people who watched my last video got hurt enough to try to find out where I work, called my dealership to try to get me fired. So that is where I drew the line, and I really wanted to bring out some more information and be able to talk to some of these people. And it's not like I didn't try in the last video to bring up conversation. In many of the comments I tried to, but was stonewalled a lot of the time because really this is a pretty touchy subject. So I wanted to get into more information with these people while not trying to start up a bunch of hate speech and trying to get into big arguments, because because obviously yelling matches, especially online, don't really get you anywhere. So the bad apples, obviously they can cause a bad taste in this, and it was a bad taste in my mouth when they tried to call and get me fired. But at the same time, I didn't want to give up this opportunity to be able to talk to some good apples and show their side of the story also. Now, the primary preface to making the video before was not to get into a whole lot of argument or anything like that, or even to go into a whole lot of detail between UAW and the GM strike, but to give a voice to those side of the technicians who are affected by this strike, the ones who don't have the UAW backing them in through all of this. I'll go into more detail later about how I don't really agree with the strike in most aspects, but I agree what they are fighting for. Now, let's try to get into some dialogue with this one, and that's really where I came from in the comments and the conversations within this last video. I got to talk to a couple of people, but most of the time I was stonewalled by people who were in general just upset at the fact that I had a differing opinion than them. Now, luckily, I was able to get into contact with one specific individual. It happened through a happenstance that wasn't really on the brightest of terms between us, but we did get to talking. There was quite a bit of heated discussion between us two, but you know what? In the end, we were actually able to both be adults and talk back and forth with each other about our views of this strike and who it's affected and how it's affected them. So, without myself giving more of my opinion of what I think between the strike and the UAW and what society as a whole sees the UAW as, I wanted to give them a chance to be able to talk about themselves and give the corrected representation for what they wanted to put out into the public's eyes. So I was able to get a hold of Mr. Shane Haston, which is a local of Fort Wayne, UAW 2209. I believe that is the correct one with that one. We were able to talk for quite a few hours this last week on our differing viewpoints and opinions. So I wanted to give him his couple of minutes and be able to bring to light exactly what his views and most of the good apples of the UAW are. So let's cut over to Mr. Haston and see what he had to say on the subject.
My name is Shane Haston. I am a 20-year employee of General Motors. I'm a proud union member of Local 2209 here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The question is, why did the UAW strike General Motors? Well, there's three reasons. First of all, General Motors makes the most amount of money. Second of all, they have closed the most amount of plants, and they have also put a huge amount of people out of work. They put the most people out of work than any of the big three. So the UAW and General Motors have been in a contract in a national contract for 80 years. Back in the 1930s, when all this began, a large amount of violence took place all over the country, mainly in Michigan. There was people being beaten and clubbed, and there was a lot of violence. Once the company realized that they were in a losing battle and they weren't going to win, they finally decided to recognize the UAW. The UAW unions fought for the cost of living, a 40-hour work week, safety regulations, and many other things that are becoming common business practices throughout other companies throughout the entire country. So it's kind of common knowledge that people think the UAW and unions are bad. And they think that because there's a few bad apples that defines who we are, and it absolutely is not. Just like any large organization or company, you have people that extort money. You have people that take advantage of unemployment, Medicare, any large entity that can help people take advantage of it. Companies are no different. We do have a few bad apples in the UAW. Some of these folks have been extorting money from the training center in Detroit. The investigation continues as we sort out the dirty players. These folks, like I said, do not define who we are. Our members are excellent people, and we just want to make the best product possible for our customers. Now that we've talked about the bad apples, let's talk about all the good things that the UAW does, especially here at this local, 2209 in Fort Wayne. Every year, we donate $250,000. That's a lot of money, $250,000 to the United Way from our local alone. We also have a big fundraiser for Make-A-Wish, you know, to benefit children that are sick and some are terminal. We volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. We build houses for our community. Associated Churches of Fort Wayne. Every Christmas we go through and take donations for them. Toys for Tots with the Marine Corps League. Every winter, right before Christmas, we go through and we donate all these toys. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. We raise money for breast cancer. We're doing that right now. We're selling t-shirts out in our lobby to benefit breast cancer awareness. We donate our time as teachers, mentors, and coaches right here in our community all year long. So this strike with the UAW against General Motors of 2019 has a huge ripple effect. I mean, it's enormous. 48,000 UAW workers stood up to General Motors, and there's reasons for that. But it affects 48,000 UAW members, 200,000 workers in the United States alone, and then another 200,000 between Canada and Mexico. And what I mean by that, people that make the parts, these other little factories that make parts, that supply General Motors, the truck drivers, anybody that's affiliated with the auto industry in one way or another is affected. Now, yes, that sounds bad, but the reason that we go on strike is not just for us, it's for you and everybody. We want to set the standard, make everything better for the working middle class. We want you to make more money, have better insurance, better vacations, better working standards, just a safer and better environment for everybody. We are setting that standard. Never forget that. Okay, Kyle, aka the Rustbelt Mechanic, made a video the other day, and I didn't really agree with what he said. So we had some discussions. We went back and forth. It got a little heated, but in the long run, he was willing to listen, and I was willing to listen to him. The UAW, a lot of people don't like what the UAW stands for. And I understand that because, back in the day when I was a young guy, I didn't quite understand what the union was about. I had a bad attitude about it, but then I became part of the union, and I absolutely love my union. So with Kyle, it was a little bit of a challenge to get him to understand, but I think that he did. He relayed to me the issues that he's having and all of his friends are having as far as like mechanics that don't have parts, General Motors parts to put in vehicles, to fix them, to repair them. The truck drivers and the people he knows that are struggling because of our strike. And I get that, and I really do, because I've been on that side of it. I have been I worked in a grocery store for several years, and when a company went on strike, it affected me. It affected our hours, it affected our pay. So with that, he was willing to be educated, and that is awesome. And I'm hoping that this video helps educate you to know that we are not only here for ourselves, but we are here, like I said earlier, to set the standard across the country.
We had conversation, and it started out very, very heated, but I think we were able to get our point of conversation over to the other side without having to have a big yelling and hate match back and forth. Once you actually get started into a conversation, you might actually get drawn in enough to understand where the other side is coming from. Now, the UAW as a whole, I agree with what they are, what they mean, what they stand for. However, like I said, what leaves a bad taste in your mouth are those bad apples, and it's hard for any organization to be able to stand behind some of those members who are the bad apples. But we have to try to be big adults and who are able to actually have conversation back and forth between each other, who are actually able to converse and get our opinions back and forth without turning into a shouting match. I personally do not believe in the strike. I believe in what it stands for and what they're fighting for. Pretty much everything that Shane said was a reason that really needs to be fought for. However, going and jumping off of the job to go on strike, I don't believe that that is really the best way. In my personal opinion, and like I said, this is my personal opinion only, do not take this as fact or whatever, I think that the UAW should take all the funds that they are taking from those and take them to Congress. Go to maybe change the legislation around to where these larger companies can't abuse all of the power that they have to put people on part-time work just to save a penny or kill the economy in what they're doing with it. Killing these people's lives in the middle class is what a lot of these larger companies are doing, and I get it, that's what the UAW is fighting for. However, there is so much more at stake right now in the US that you can see the trickle-down effects right now as they're happening. One point to mind would be the technicians. Not me specifically, I work for Chrysler, but I may be actually seeing this here in the next couple of weeks. GM employees as technicians here in the States, as well as Canada and Mexico, are seeing the effects. They can't get parts. The drivers who pick up things from these plants, such as parts or even metal shavings, scrap deliveries to and from the plants, incoming importers for their parts, they are all at a perfect standstill because the people making the cars are not working. I personally think that UAW and GM should have been at the talking point months and months before this contract came up onto the end. It was one of those heated debates where they just weren't able to come to an understanding, and that's where the actual strike started. I think personally they should have been adults in themselves and been able to go forward and find issues. As he was talking about the bad apples, some of them, unfortunately with the UAW, were some of the higher ups, and as I spoke with in that video, some of them are under investigation for being less than upstanding citizens and extorting money and such. But like I said, bad apples are going to be there. So where are we going to move forward from this point? Currently, GM and the UAW have come to a kind of tentative agreement. They have until this next Friday, which I believe is the 29th, to reach an agreement and actually get their vote out to all of their different members. All of these members, they are to vote all individually, which I think is amazing. Having the democratic process within their organization, I think is a great thing, and they need that to happen. But I think moving forward, the actual leadership from here on needs to take the reins and needs to be more proactive because of how negatively this is affecting the economy, not just in the state of Michigan, but across the entire US, Canada, and Mexico. They need to be bigger than themselves and think about the rest of the US economy, and moving forward from this point, that's where they need to go. So now, moving forward, where I want you guys to go as viewers to this video, I want you to go down in the comments below and let's start some conversation. If you have some hard feelings or anything, let's start by asking a question of, say, either the side of the UAW, the side of GM, or the side of technicians or a third party who's affected by this but doesn't have a larger corporation to be able to stand behind them. Let's get those questions rolling between each other. I'm going to be, we'll say, policing the comments a lot more in this one. Keep the nasty negative comments to yourself if you have that. I want you guys to be able to talk between each other and figure out the viewpoints of each and other's sides. I think that's one of the biggest and best things here about America is we have our freedom of speech. Yes, that is true, but I want us to grow up, be Americans, be adults, and actually converse with each other, figure out where each other's coming from in this one. Well guys, that's about all I have for you today on this subject. If you like this video, make sure you hit that thumbs up and also make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got all kinds of cool things happening all the time. If you're new, make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification so you get notified when I come out with cool, amazing content just like this one. I appreciate all you viewers tuning in. Thank you, and as always, you guys stay awesome.